Welcome to our special program, Repairing Roads and Rails. We're going to be talking about roads and rails and bridges and maybe even some seaports as we discuss the dire straits of transportation, not only in central Illinois, but across the country. If you've driven the roads, you've probably come across a pothole or seen some crumbling highway, but it goes much deeper than that. And we're going to look at some numbers. In the state of Illinois, according to the Illinois Department of Transportation, there are 2,185 miles of interstate alone. There are 24 different interstates in the state of Illinois. Interstate travel is up 25% in the last 20 years, and totaling all mileage in Illinois, 140,000 miles of roadway. That's a daunting task when you talk about maintenance and you talk about even building new roads. To discuss the issue, we've invited four panelists. Ray LaHood is here. Ray is the former Secretary of Transportation, a 7-term congressman from Peoria, and most importantly for our conversation, the co-chair of Building America's Future, which we'll discuss in just a moment. Seated next to Ray is Congresswoman Cheri Bustos. She is from East Moline, representing the 17th Congressional District. She's a member of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and the Subcommittee on Highways and Transit. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
And we also have joining us at the state level, State Representative Tim Butler. He represents the 87th District, which is parts or all of Tazewell, Menard, Logan, and Sangamon counties. He's a member of the House Transportation, Regulation, Roads, and Bridges Committee. And seated next to Tim is Tom Pallett. Tom is the Group President for Construction Industries at Caterpillar Incorporated. And before we start the discussion, maybe a little discussion about Building America's Future. What is that, Ray?
It's an organization funded by Bloomberg, primarily by former Mayor Mike Bloomberg. It's an organization that was founded probably 5 years ago. The original co-chairs were Governor Schwarzenegger, Mayor Bloomberg, and Governor Rendell, former governor of Pennsylvania. When Governor Schwarzenegger left office, they invited me to participate as one of the co-chairs. We travel the country and talk about what needs to be done to fix up our infrastructure and how to fund it. So we speak before a lot of different groups around the country. Our goal is to try and spur our friends on in Congress and state legislatures to fix our crumbling infrastructure and to fund it.
What's your sense right now of progress that you're making?
Very little, except for 14 states that have raised the gas tax and are addressing, and not our state of Illinois, but 14 other states around the country over the last 2 years have actually raised their own gas tax in order to address transportation and infrastructure needs. Illinois, we haven't done that well. And frankly, around the country, we haven't. You know, I've characterized the country as one big pothole. These brutal winters that we've had in our country, not just in the Midwest, but really all over the country, extreme heats or extreme colds have turned our roads into gravel and turned our bridges into some bridges where people don't even want to cross them anymore. And we're talking thousands of bridges and hundreds of roads. And America's never been in this position before. We have a crisis not only in our infrastructure, but in the funding of it. And we've never been in a place like this before. This is the worst our country has ever been. And we need good people in Washington and in our state capitals to come to grips with the idea that they have to find the money to fix our roads and bridges.
We're going to show you evidence of those roads and bridges, the condition they're in, as we visit McLean County and Peoria County. But first, I want to turn to Tom Pallett and Construction Industries. What is Construction Industries at Caterpillar?
So Caterpillar is organized in three main verticals, which are facing our customers. And one of those is Resource Industries, which is largely the mining business. We have Energy and Transportation, including a rail division, power generation, gas turbines. And then the third vertical is Construction Industries, which is the vertical that I lead. And it's really at the heart of what you think of when you think of Caterpillar. So it's the equipment that you see in construction sites around the country, track-type tractors, motor graders, wheel loaders, et cetera. And that's the part that I have responsibility for.
You mentioned the turbines. You came from Solar Turbine in San Diego.
I did. I spent a large part of my career at that division.
And I understand that there are occasions when you actually move those San Diego's right on the ocean. You should be
Right.
able to go to Long Beach, ship those out, but sometimes you don't.
Yeah, so depending on capacity issues, sometimes we ship them actually by road to Houston and ship them out of the port of Houston, so that's quite a challenge. Some of that's driven by geographic destination, but also by capacity, and we all know the challenges that the West Coast ports have had over the past couple of years. So, and I would mention to Ray, when you talk about the brutal winters, I can tell you, having just moved from California, they don't have a brutal winter, but the roads aren't in good shape there either. So you make a good point. It's a nationwide problem.
And it includes those seaports that he referenced. Sometimes Long Beach can't handle those, and so they go to Houston.
Look, what's going to happen is the Panama Canal is going to expand. There's going to be a new channel, and if we don't start preparing our ports, Sherry knows this, having served on the Transportation Committee and passed a WRDA bill, the Water Resource Bill, we need to really pay attention to our ports, provide them the resources to expand their capacity. We're going to have these Panamatic ships coming in because of the expansion of the Panama Canal. And frankly, there are very few ports in America that can handle them right now because they don't have the capacity and they don't have the depth of in their harbors in order to accommodate these ships.
Let's turn to the issue of bridges first. Many of you may suffer from gyphyrophobia. Gyphyrophobia, it's the fear of crossing bridges, and it's not just an arbitrary fear. There's a real fear for some people. There are 26,000, more than 26,000 bridges in the state of Illinois, according to the Federal Highway Administration. There are 134 million bridge crossings in Illinois every day. And for discussion purposes, functionally obsolete, a bridge that is functionally obsolete does not meet current design standards. That doesn't mean that it is in bad shape, it just means it doesn't meet the design requirements. Structurally deficient is a question of its condition, depending on whether it's a substructure, the deck, or whether it is the superstructure. 1 in 9 bridges in the U.S. are structurally deficient. Illinois has the 9th most structurally deficient bridges. Let's take a look at some of those in McLean and Peoria County.
The bridge substructure is rated as a 2, which is very poor condition due to deterioration of the wood piles, or essentially telephone poles that support this bridge. This bridge is currently only 24 feet wide, which makes it functionally obsolete because the new bridge will be 30 feet wide. This bridge is going to be replaced with a new bridge. It'll be all concrete and steel. This bridge is estimated to cost $1.7 million. The reason this project is so much money is because we have to improve 2,000 feet of roadway. Part of that is because this bridge is in the bottom of a hill or bottom of a sag. We need to fill up the hillside or fill up the sag curve and lower the ends of the hills a little bit to make it an easier transition for vehicles. It's in poor condition. The superstructure is rated as a 4 due to deterioration of the beams. The channel condition is always also rated as a 4 because of undermining of the protective slope wall. The sufficiency rating is not yet low enough for the bridge to be federally funded. However, the condition is bad enough now that we have concerns that we are going to have to lower the weight limit on the bridge. This bridge has a collision impact in the corner here, where a vehicle has hit the bridge. It has damaged the bridge rail and the connections to the bridge rail. Also, the bridge in several places underneath has exposed reinforcement, so the reinforcement that is the strength of the bridge is exposed and is deteriorating and rusting. The deck itself is in poor condition. The beam joints are up through the wearing surface, which allows water and moisture and salt corrosion to go through and further corrode the beams more than they already are. We are reconstructing the intersection into a roundabout. The previous intersection was a dangerous T intersection where cars had a hard time seeing other cars and caused quite a few accidents. We would love to improve Ogalina Road from Illinois 29 all the way up through Cedar Hills Drive. That portion of the project is $17.6 million is what we estimated at. We simply do not have any more funding for doing the rest of Ogalina Road, which is in dire need of reconstruction.
This is the Gridley Road here. It's a hot mix asphalt road, and it's reaching the end of its design life, and you're starting to see a lot of deterioration. We've crack filled this road, but you're also starting to see a lot of wear and deterioration of the surface because of age, and it needs to be resurfaced. At Shirley Overpass, the road, it's the approach is coming up to the actual overpass structure over Interstate 55. And this, at this location, we've got it's a concrete pavement, and the joints are starting to fail and starting to see some cracking, and it needs to be actually patched and then overlaid. This is a township bridge in Martin Township, close to Colfax. It's a timber pile bridge that has some deterioration of timber piles and the planking behind, and it is needed replacement. It's planned for replacement in 2016 and be a total replacement of the structure because it is currently posted, load posted, for restrictions below the 80,000 pound loads. The Rock Road Bridge is a county highway bridge. It's down on County Highway 40 between Leroy and Bellflower Saybrook Road, and it is a older bridge. It was built back in the 1930s. It's showing some significant deterioration on the T-beams, and it is needed replacement. It's programmed as a federal bridge replacement project in 2016.
The Tazewell County bridges and roads are ranked fourth most deficient at 27% deficient by RebootIllinois.com. Peoria County is ranked fourth. Tazewell County is 12th most deficient. Peoria County is fourth most deficient, according to RebootIllinois.com. I want to turn to our elected representatives right now and ask them their opinion. Now that you've seen it, I know that you've been out and looked at roads and bridges before, and you have also, Tim, but what's your initial response when you see things like this and you know people are driving over these kinds of roads and bridges?
I drive across those roads and bridges every day. I've seen it myself. And you know, a large majority of our roads in Illinois are not state or federal roads. They're township roads and they're township bridges. And township and municipalities have a very hard time funding these improvements. As I travel my district, I certainly hear from mayors and township officials that this is a top priority, that we need to fix these roads, and they just don't have the money to deal with it. So I know all of us have driven roads that we've had to detour because a bridge has been out, or you can no longer pass across it. And as we move forward, we're only seeing that more and more, and we need to find a solution to be able to help out especially our local folks on these things.
And we heard that the cost of fixing the road up to Cedar Street is $17 million. The budget for Peoria County's Highway Department every year is only $12 million. Obviously a problem. The transportation bill. We've been languishing in making a decision since 1997 for a long-term funded transportation bill. What's the holdup? You see these bridges and roads.
Well, first, you asked what we thought of when we just watched that. Well, I think that is one county out of 102 in the state of Illinois, and multiply all of that by 50 states. And back to what Secretary LaHood said, you know, we have been negligent in making sure that we're taking care of our roads and bridges, the same roads and bridges that our kids take their school buses to school every day, the same roads and bridges that our parents drive to go to the grocery store. So yeah, there's real concern. That last image that you had up there that showed this crumbling, rusted bridge, that's the reason why we have our farmers, when they're taking their grain to market, can't take the bridge right by their farm. They've got to drive 6 miles down the road. So it's inefficient, it costs money, it costs resources. And when are we going to give a company like Caterpillar some certainty? Well, we need to do that by passing a long-term highway bill.
And we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but first we want to review some numbers for the audience. The federal gas tax is 18.4 cents a gallon. That has not changed since 1993. The Illinois gas tax is 19 cents a gallon. Diesel's a little bit higher, 24.4 and 21.5. And there is a sales tax. Illinois is one of only 7 states that has a sales tax on its fuel. It is, of course, 6.25%. Local governments get 27% of that tax. And as I mentioned, the federal tax has not been raised since 1993. Let's listen to some of the concerns of the county engineers.
Back in 2002, we were paying 82 cents a gallon for the oil spread on the road. And that's one of our main maintenance operations for our oil and chip roads. And now we're paying about $2.47 a gallon. So that price has almost tripled in the last 13 years, but our revenue for motor fuel tax is down. So that, you've got increasing costs, but decreasing revenue. It's those lines are going in opposite directions. That gap just continues to grow.
Peoria County Highway Department has a $12 million budget. Out of that, last year we spent $1 million on salt. To engineer a project like this costs about $300,000, and the typical bridge on a county system costs $1.5 million.
From planning perspective, like with federal dollars, you program, if you have a long-term bill, like a 6-year transportation bill, you know those dollar amounts that fairly closely what they're going to be for that the term of that bill, and you can program around that. As where if it's not known and you don't get those numbers till a solid number till a year in advance, it's harder to program and know exactly what money you have to work with.
Our wish list is just to have a dedicated funding stream that we can, instead of just holding tight or losing ground, that we can start improving our roads and getting farther along on our roads instead of just spinning our wheels, maintaining potholes, and doing other things like that.
Let's get to the crux of the matter. You alluded to it, there has been no transportation bill long-term funded. What's the prospect?
Well, the recent history is that we've had 34 short-term extensions. So why are we facing these problems? Because of that. Secretary LaHood can weigh in on this. He's certainly served in Congress a lot longer than I have. I've been in a term and a half, but I support a bill that has bipartisan support. And what it does, it would take the $2 trillion plus of overseas corporate profits, bring those home through something that's called repatriation, tax it at a rate that our corporate friends can accept, and it gives us 6 years worth of funding for our Highway Trust Fund. During those 6 years, it also assembles a bipartisan group panel that would look at long-term sustainable funding. We haven't raised the gas tax since President Clinton was in office. It was not indexed to inflation. It falls way short of what our needs are. But this gives us a 6-year highway bill, gives some certainty to our good corporate friends like Caterpillar. It creates our jobs, our engineering jobs, puts people back to work, and improves the roads and bridges that you've seen have deteriorated to a point where they're in many cases unsafe.
If that bill is passed as proposed, it would put $120 billion into the Highway Trust Fund, $50 billion to Capitalize American Infrastructure Fund, and $25 million for a pilot program to create a regional infrastructure accelerator. What is that?
Well, it basically gives local forms of government that we were talking about earlier, gives them more say in what those local projects are as well. Rodney Davis, a fellow congressman out of the Springfield area, and I are co-sponsors of a separate bill that would weigh into this, but that would give local forms of government more say-so on how those dollars are spent. And we think that's important as well.
Let me turn to the Caterpillar Group President, Tom Pallett. How important is a long-term funded transportation bill?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I mean, the certainty that Representative Bustos mentioned is critical, for the states, for the local townships, for the engineering companies, the contractors, and for equipment providers like we are. So to have that long-term vision, a long-term bill. And, I think it's kind of mentioned, we build construction equipment for the road construction, and so we would hope that as this construction happened, some of those projects will be done with our equipment. It's a very competitive marketplace for us. But if you take that aside, what's really critical for us, I see it really as a global competitiveness issue from a corporate perspective. So I've spent a significant part of my career with Caterpillar overseas, and when I compare our infrastructure against the other developed countries in the world, it's sadly lacking, and even some of developing countries. And so, I think it's a competitive issue. We've been in business for around 90 years, and we started very much as a U.S. company, but we've become global. Still to this day, 40% of our business is done here in the U.S. We export around 60%. 40% of our plants, we have 70 plants still in the U.S. 40% of our employees roughly are here in the U.S. And so it's a competitiveness issue that, manufacturing, which is important. We exported around $88 billion worth of goods over the past 5 years. We need infrastructure so that our supply chains can supply our U.S. plants. And then once we build the product, that we can get it quickly, efficiently, cost-effectively to export ports or to U.S. customers.
And to the Caterpillar dealers across North America, how important is this in terms of planning?
Yeah, same issue. I mean, we are largely shipping equipment in terms of domestic market. We have around 50 dealers within the U.S., and so we're largely shipping equipment to them, and then they ship it on to the end users, the contractors, construction companies around the U.S., and then they have to provide product support. So good infrastructure is vital to all of that. So if you set aside the fact that we're in the business of building roads and bridges, just to stay in business and compete on a global basis, it's critical that infrastructure is up to snuff. I mean, we can have delays of 3 to 4 days just trying to get our equipment, around certain states because of load limits to ports, and even sending things to ports in Canada to be able to get them out of North America. So,
H, let me just say this about a multi-year, 6-year bill. It really is a jobs bill. We're talking about building roads and bridges. None of this money really stays in Washington. All of it comes back to the states, either to the state DOTs or to communities. And what happens is friends and neighbors go to work. You see the orange cones, that means somebody in your community is working, rebuilding a road, rebuilding a bridge. So this is a jobs bill as well as a bill that's going to redo our infrastructure. If you want to put America back to work quickly, pass a multi-year transportation bill and fund it. And it's not only good for Caterpillar dealers, it's great for people who build roads and bridges. The largest segment in unemployment in America today is in the building trades because nothing's happening in America. And so it's a win-win. When you pass a transportation bill, it's a win-win for America because the money goes back to America.
You're shaking your head yes.
Well, I 100% agree with what he's saying.
Then what's the holdup? It's been 18 years since a long-term transportation bill has been fully funded and passed.
Well, the holdup is you've got to have a willing leadership that's going to bring forth a bill that we can vote on. We have been presented these short-term fixes. I supported the 3-month fix in July. I voted for that because we have to have funding to at least keep things operational. But I reluctantly supported that with the thought that over those 3 months, let's sit down, let's negotiate, and let's get something at a bipartisan level that we can vote for. I like the repatriation bill because it does have bipartisan support. There are 3 different versions of that. The version that I support taxes that at 8.75%. That's a middle tax rate. The president has a higher tax rate that I don't think any Republicans will get on board, and then there's a lower tax rate. And so I think that middle rate, it gives us 6 years worth of funding, and we can, Democrats, Republicans can come together. And I know Secretary LaHood would agree with this, but this is really not a partisan issue. It is a jobs issue, and we need to come together. We had the greatest interstate highway system in the world that started under President Eisenhower, and why we've let it get to this point is really beyond explanation.
And that was a bipartisan effort back in 1956 when they started the interstate system. Let's take it down to the state level. Representative Tim Butler, how important is it from a state perspective that the federal set the standard here with a long-term funded transportation
Well,
bill?
first of all, I would say the holdup has been the funding issue. I mean, we know that the road fund is not the same or where it needs to be, and so there is a reluctance amongst a lot of people to raise taxes. We don't like to raise taxes. I mean, that's who a lot of people are. But if we're going to have the services that we want, we need to look at repatriation. We need to look at raising the gas tax. I hate to say it, we probably need to look at a VMT as well. It's not something I support, but there's a lot of proposals out there to bring money into the system to create the transportation network that we need. On the state level, we need, just like Caterpillar, we need the certainty of a long-term plan. It's very difficult for IDOT to plan on their 5-year plan what they're going to put out there if we don't know what's coming in from the feds. As the Secretary said, this is largely pass-through money that comes to the state that is doled out for work around the state. So it's up to us to determine what our priorities are, and when we don't know what the funding stream is going to be, it makes it very difficult to have our priorities.
The representative mentioned the gas tax. The federal gas tax has not been raised since 1993. It is a flat tax. It's not a percentage tax, it's a flat tax. Couple that with the problem that we have more fuel-efficient vehicles now, and that income is becoming ever so much smaller. Is there any hope that we might raise the gas tax, or are there some alternatives?
I don't think that's going to happen in Congress. I don't see that happening. The chairman of the transportation bill, the Transportation Committee, Representative Schuster out of Pennsylvania, he wants to get something passed. And he said he's open to whatever is feasible. But you've got to have Democrats and Republicans who are going to be willing to support something. Again, I think what has the most support is what I had mentioned earlier. But that does give us this bipartisan panel to take a look at what are the long-term sustainable answers to this. And what Tim was talking about, the VMT stands for vehicle miles traveled. So when you have the electric cars that don't pay, they don't have to fill up their cars with gasoline, what is their contribution to making sure our roads and bridges are solid going forth?
And there's a vehicle miles traveled experiment in Oregon right now. There are some other alternatives, wholesale fuel tax in Virginia. Arkansas passed a retail sales tax, I think it's 0.5%, specifically for highways. Diversion tax, there's the cigarette tax in Idaho is diverted to highways. Do you see a trend, or is there any hope there?
What we need to do is persuade Congress to pass a 6-year bill and to find the money to do it. I think the repatriation does have the support, one version of it certainly has the support of President Obama. It has the support of the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, where the bill has to come from to pay for all of these things. And so, maybe the stars are becoming, aligned because of the fact that people are fed up of having to make repairs on their cars because they hit a pothole in the road, and people live in fear of crossing a bridge because they're afraid it might fall down while they're on it. Now Congress has come to the idea that we need a multi-year bill, and we need to find the money for it. I prefer raising the gas tax, H. That's the big pot of money that built America. That's why America was #1 in infrastructure. That's why we had the best roads for so many years. That's why we were the envy of the world when it came to infrastructure, because we had a big pot of money. President Reagan, believe it or not, raised the gas tax. President George Herbert Walker Bush raised the gas tax. President Clinton raised the gas tax. It takes some leadership, and look, I served with President Obama. I know he doesn't like the idea of raising the gas tax. I've heard him say it. He's come out in favor of repatriation, but for the benefit of America and American workers and our infrastructure, we need to get our act together here and get something done.
Representative, I mentioned some of the other states and the techniques they're using to try to boost the highway taxes or other taxes to help highways. In Illinois, there's a sales tax on gasoline.
We've got the gas tax, which is 19 cents a gallon, and then we have a 6.25% sales tax as well. The gas tax has not been raised since 1990. I think in today's dollars, that would be about 32 cents that would go into the road fund. The sales tax goes into the general revenue fund, and this is a problem that we have in the state of Illinois. So that sales tax is not even dedicated to go into the road fund. So the General Assembly has a great history of taking those dollars and using it for other purposes. I think we need to make sure that money that goes into the road fund, or money, if you're buying a gallon of gas and you're paying 6.25% on it, that money's going to roads and not going to somewhere else. We have a large structural budget problem in Illinois that we need to address. And once we address that, that will help us also with the funding of transportation issues. This year, when we had to close a $1.5 billion budget hole in Illinois that was left over from the previous administration, one of the things that we did was we swept part of the road fund to pay for that because we could do it. We need to make sure that that stuff's walled off and goes dedicated to roads and not get swept up in other things.
Has there been any discussion in the Transportation Committee meetings or outside the meetings with regard to some of these other techniques?
You know, I was actually in a meeting over in Champaign a few weeks ago where we actually had a long discussion about the vehicle miles tax. And, you know, I think it's an interesting proposition. Certainly, there's a lot of questions about the privacy around that, about folks, if you're traveling on Illinois roads from out of state, you know, you're not going to be paying into the VMT, things like that. So, you know, there's other avenues out there. I think in the state as well, it mostly coalesces around the gas tax. The Transportation for Illinois Coalition, which is a group of business and labor and folks from around the state, are looking at areas like the gas tax, I think, to really, as some place where we could add funds into the road fund.
Congresswoman, the U.S. Senate passed a long-term transportation bill, a 6-year bill, but it was funded for only 3 years. It's a $350 billion bill, but funded for only half of its life. Has there been any discussion in the House with regard to that?
No.
Is there any hope that the House will take that up and pass, or is there going to be some sort of compromise?
Well, so the extension that we passed goes through the end of October, and that's the time that the Highway Trust Fund is bankrupt. So we literally have until the end of October to come up with some kind of answer. There's not talk about taking on the Senate version. Again, my hope is that Paul Ryan, who heads the Ways and Means Committee, brings up this repatriation idea. And some of what I've heard is that he likes the idea of repatriation, but not necessarily used for transportation. So I think it's like a wait to be seen type of thing. And just one other thought I had when Tim was talking. You know, I think the American public is open to whatever funding source makes sense and gives us a long-term transportation bill. But they need to be given the assurance that we're going to do this right. I mean, people are sick and tired of a bait and switch type of mentality, just like the lottery was supposed to be for our schools in Illinois.
Education.
Well, that didn't happen. People want to be told that if you're going to pay this out of your hard-earned dollars every time you fill up your car or whatever tax means that we have, that they're going to get something for that they are going to see pothole-free roads, that they're going to have confidence when they cross that bridge. But we've got to give the American public confidence that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And right now, that's lacking.
You share that on the state level?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's frustrating that you know, if we've got money set aside for a particular program, that it's not going to that. The road fund itself, you know, there are years when only 50% of the road fund money actually goes to construction on road projects. So, you know, we need to make sure if money's going into these programs that we're building up our infrastructure with those dollars.
I know that you're the group president for Construction Industries, but what's Caterpillar's stance on looking at the legislatures and looking at Congress and saying, do something?
Yeah, I guess we're actively involved in Washington in trying to encourage that, and that's probably a better question for the elected representatives. But from our perspective, you know, once again, coming back, we need that long-term certainty. You know, from a corporate competitiveness perspective on a global basis, you know, we have absolutely fierce competition from China, from Europe, here in the U.S. as well. And in order to be competitive on both sides, you know, we really need the infrastructure that goes along with our investments in our plants. I would mention one other thing, because safety and, you know, our parents and our children riding on these roads, it was mentioned also by you, Secretary LaHood and Representative Bustos. I mentioned we still have 40% of our workforce here in the U.S., 70 plants, and our highest concentration of team members, of employees, is here in Illinois. We have, you know, more than 20,000 in Illinois and around 15,000 in the Peoria area. So we are also concerned, you know, they need to get to work each day and home to work safely. And it was interesting, the video had the old Galena Road. So we have 7,000 employees that are going to our plants there, our buildings in the Mossville area, that are trying to use that road. And now it's diverted kind of around our campus there. So I mean, it's a classic example where, I mean, that's a lot of jobs, and these people need to be able to get to work, so, right here at home.
One of the issues is it's a partial solution. They're fixing the southern portion of that where State runs into Old Galena. It's going to be a roundabout, but the intersection at Cedar Hills Drive is in abysmal shape, and so we only have a partial solution to that, and it seems to be the way we solve things is we'll put a Band-Aid here and we'll fix this and then we'll ignore this.
Well, it's true because there is no big picture plan. There is no big pot of money. There is no opportunity to really plan long range. Sherry lives in a community where they've been trying to figure out how to replace a bridge across the Mississippi River for 10 years. They've reverted to using duct tape and all kinds of other things, and I know Sherry has worked very hard on this. That bridge needs to be replaced. When I was secretary, I was over there, and it's a bridge that's falling down. And, there are classic examples of that all over America. If you want to look where progress is being made, you go to Asia, you go to China, because the national government is investing. People that go to China come back scratching their heads. Why aren't we doing this in America? They're building new roads, new bridges, new high-speed rail, and what's happening? They're attracting business. When you build that kind of capacity, you create economic corridors, economic opportunities for economic development. That's why American companies are looking to Asia and to South America, because they have the infrastructure that can get their workers back and forth to work and to provide the kind of road systems that allow for the economic development that's taking place. And we are lacking for that all over America right now.
Pretty strong words. Can we step forward and literally catch up to these other nations?
Well, we've got a long way to go now because, as Secretary LaHood said, they've been investing now for many, many years while we've been falling behind. The bridge that Secretary LaHood was talking about goes over the Mississippi River. Thousands of people cross that bridge. Here's the problem, though. It's $1 billion replacement project. It's in the works. The state of Illinois is investing on the Illinois side. The state of Iowa is investing on the Iowa side of the Quad Cities. And we are moving forward. I think it'll happen. But again, multiply that by all the rivers that we have throughout this country, and that is the problem that we're facing right now. We have so much to catch up to. But we're a great country. We've done this before. We've got to come together. We have to remove the politics from it, and we have to give assurances to the people who we serve in Illinois and the people we serve throughout the country that we're going to do this the right way with a plan, and they're going to get what they're paying for.
If you look at the 14 states over the last 2 years that have raised their own gas tax to pay for their own infrastructure, several of these states are very, very conservative states. For example, Wyoming and Utah, completely controlled by Republican governors and Republican legislators. And they have voted to raise their gas tax, and they haven't been thrown out of office. And my point is, I think repatriation is a fine idea, and if that's the way Congress wants to go, so be it. But if we want to get back to being number one, and we want to develop a big pot of money, we need to raise the gas tax, index it to the cost of living, and we'll be back in business again. And we'll solve a lot of problems, and we ought to be taking our cues from these states that have had politicians that have been willing to do it and haven't been thrown out of office.
So why do you think that hasn't spread across the nation?
Well, I think it is spreading across the nation. I think in the last 2 years, 14 states out of 50, that's a pretty good number, and very conservative states also. And people see the money not only filling potholes, but resurfacing roads and rebuilding bridges. They know the money's being well spent, and they're satisfied with their elected officials. They're doing right by them.
Any chance of raising the gas tax in Illinois?
Oh, I do think there's a chance. Like I said, Transportation for Illinois Coalition has pushed this issue for quite a long time, and it's a broad-based group. I think in the dynamic that we have in Springfield, where it's a split government with the Republican in the governor's mansion and Democrats controlling the General Assembly, I do think you could see the possibility. We got to get beyond some other issues in the State House right now, but I do think there certainly is an emphasis on transportation and improving our infrastructure, and I think that could be something that would happen.
When you look at the states that have raised their own gas tax, they are not in the mess that we are.
Yeah.
I mean, our state is in a huge fiscal mess, huge deficits for our budget when they're supposed to be balanced, huge pension issues. And Tim is right. I mean, we're not going to get around to addressing transportation issues until we fix these other two big problems. Yeah. And that's what they're laboring under right now in Springfield. And when you look at the other states that have done this, they're in pretty good fiscal shape.
The bill that you support in Congress does not address the U.S. gas tax, leaves it the way it is?
How the U.S. gas tax is addressed in that bill is to set up this bipartisan panel to study long-term sustainability of our Highway Trust Fund. And have this committee come back with a recommendation to Congress as to this is what we need to do to fund our highways and our bridges and our rail and airports and everything going forth.
Look, with all due respect to Sherry, and I want to be respectful here because she's worked hard on these issues. The best way to kill a good idea is to refer it to a committee. And that's what's happening. Look, the issue is, do we want to get back to being number one? Do we need a big pot of money? The answer is yes. One way to get it is to raise the gas tax. I know politicians. Look, I served in Congress for 14 years. The last thing a politician wants to do is raise taxes. But when people see the money going to fix up their infrastructure, creating jobs, they see their friends and neighbors working, they feel a lot better about it. And I don't want to poo-poo the idea of a committee because, you know, that's an idea that maybe its time has come. But we know what the answers are. Tolling, vehicle miles traveled, public-private partnerships. We used all of those while we were at DOT. But if you want to get a pot of money that is going to get us back to being number one and put our people to work, you need to raise the gas tax. That's what built America.
You're sounding like a lobbyist here.
Oh. Well, I'm lobbying for better infrastructure and how to pay for it. And you know, I just think it's the right way to go.
Well, let's talk about one of the other things that you're very fervent about, and that's high-speed rail. Mm-hmm. What's your position on high-speed rail, and what is the definition of high-speed rail in the U.S. versus Europe?
I think what's going on in California is probably the best definition. Started by Schwarzenegger, and when President Obama persuaded Congress to pass the economic stimulus, we were able to get $48 billion at DOT. $8 billion was for high-speed rail, of which about $4 billion helped jumpstart high-speed rail in California. Governor Brown has shown the leadership and has gotten his assembly to pass millions of dollars to fund their project. They will have a train going from San Francisco to LA that goes 200 miles an hour. That currently doesn't exist in America today. And it's what the people want. It's a way to get people off the highways, to get cars off the highways, to provide a good mode of transportation, to provide an alternative. It's expensive. It's a $69 billion project. They have private investors now looking at investing. They have to have that because there's not enough state or federal money to fund the entire project. But Governor Brown is really committed to this. That's what you need. Again, you need either national or state leadership to make these kind of big projects happen. And in Illinois, while we were at DOT under Governor Quinn, we invested about $2 or $3 million in the train line between Chicago and St. Louis, and that is the lifeblood of transportation for college students all along that corridor, whether it's ISU or Western or Knox College or Southern Illinois University. Kids from the suburbs board those trains all the time, and it's the lifeblood for those universities. And then on the Northeast Corridor, you have Amtrak, and you know there's been huge investments. Those are not high speed in the sense that we think of it. California is. Las Vegas also has a plan to connect Las Vegas with Los Angeles, and that would be a high-speed train,
And
too.
there's actually a private effort, Dallas to Houston.
That's correct.
Purely
Totally
private.
private. Yeah, no tax dollars involved in that.
Because the government puts money into roads, they put money into airports, but there are some government representatives who are hesitant to put money into rail. They say, unless it can hold its own, we're not interested. Why do you, why roads and airports but not rail?
Well, look, it's the same idea when Eisenhower signed the interstate bill. Not every state wanted an interstate, and a lot of states didn't. A lot of governors said, we're not going to have an interstate. 50 years later, our country's connected because people see that these are economic corridors. Look at all the jobs that are created along the interstates in America today. And these jobs are important jobs. They're all small businesses, whether it's a Huck's, whether it's a gas station, whatever it is. These are important businesses which would have never been created had the interstate not been created. And so these investments in rail, and you look along the Northeast Corridor, the Amtrak corridor between Washington and New York, and what do you have? You have communities that have a lot of small businesses right next to train stations. And so these are not just ways to get people from one point to another. They create economic activity and jobs, not only the jobs for the people that work on the trains or that live along the economic corridor, but for the people that build it too. Again, it's a win-win. We need to provide alternatives to people, and one of the alternatives that's been lacking is rail in America.
One of the examples of economic development near a train station is over in Normal, Illinois.
There are many things that have to be accomplished before we can have 110 miles an hour service between Chicago and St. Louis. They include sidings to allow freights to get over for passenger trains or trains, one passenger train to get over for the other. We also had to install quad gates. Quad gates, most of us are used to a dual gate system where you have one gate on one side and one gate on the other. A quad gate system is exactly what it sounds like, 4 gates meeting each other on each side of the track. The entire trackage had to be converted from wooden ties to concrete ties, and all new railing was also installed. That was done in about 2010. All new passenger cars have been ordered for this line. They're being made in Rochelle, Illinois by Nippon Shiro.
A lot of the development that's happened in our uptown area, passenger rail is one of the key points of that development, one of the enticements for doing development in our uptown area. One of the reasons the Marriott Hotel sited in the uptown area was because of passenger rail. We put approximately $80 million of state, federal, and local money into this project, and it's generated about $165 million of private development and more to come based on our plan and the key aspect of passenger rail and high-speed rail. We've already talked to 2 Fortune 100 companies that are looking at locating office in the uptown area, and the quick access to Chicago via passenger rail is one of the calling cards for them.
Representative Butler, you heard the mayor of Normal. What's your take on spending some public dollars to improve rail to high speed, 110 mile an hour high speed?
Well, first of all, I think Mayor Coos has done a wonderful job in the town of Normal. If you've been to Uptown Normal, and I've spent a lot of time in Uptown Normal the last few years, the transformation over the last 10 years in Uptown Normal is absolutely incredible. Sherry made the point earlier about the bill that she has with Congressman Davis about having local input on projects. Uptown Station was an earmark gotten by our friend Ray LaHood and Senator Durbin and others. We don't have earmarks anymore. Having a bill like that allows the locals to have input on it. And I think that's vitally important, to have the locals to have the input, so we know, a lot of times we talk about the faceless bureaucrats at DOT or IDOT. Those of us who are dealing with local elected officials every day, I think we have a pretty good handle on what our needs are locally. And so if we can have the locals have input on where the money gets spent, I think that's vitally important. I think Uptown Normal, like I said, is just a shining example of how investments in infrastructure create great economic opportunities for the entire community.
Your take on investing in high-speed rail?
Probably not a whole lot different than highways and bridges. It takes money. And, we've had, the example I have out of the Quad Cities is there's a route that's actually planned from Chicago to the Quad Cities that then the plan was to go over the Mississippi River into Iowa. The governor of Iowa said he didn't want it because he didn't want to invest in that. He didn't believe in it. Amtrak's not a moneymaker. It has to be subsidized in order to succeed. So again, there has to be a governor that is willing to invest in that. There has to be a federal government willing to invest in that, and overall a state government willing to invest in it.
As a co-chair of Building the Future of America, are you pushing high-speed rail in general, or is it more highways and bridges?
Right now our number one item on our agenda is getting a multi-year transportation bill and getting it funded. That's the most critical part of what needs to be done in America today. I love high-speed rail. I promoted it for 4.5 years while I was secretary, and we'll continue to do that. But our focus is really on let's get America back to work. Let's get our infrastructure back to being number one. Let's find the money to do it, and let's persuade people in Washington that this is as critical as anything that we've ever done.
We are making progress in Illinois. If you drive up and down 55, you see it all the time. There's a lot of work that's been done on the Chicago to St. Louis corridor. You ask what high-speed rail looks like in Illinois. It's going to look like 110 miles an hour, which I don't think is where we want to be as a country. When we look at other countries that have 200 and 220 miles an hour on their high-speed rail. But I think we are making progress in Illinois. One of the issues that came up in that segment was also the idea of sidings and things like this. With rail, it's a unique relationship that we have to go in with the railroads themselves, because the railroads own the rails. So that's one of the reasons why passenger rail often gets sidetracked and slowed down, is because we have to deal with the freight trains as well. And when you look at that corridor on Interstate 55, there's a lot more freight coming down that corridor right now. I live not far from it in Springfield, just a few blocks away, and I can tell you the trains are getting larger and longer and carry much more freight and much more frequency than they've ever had before.
But freight is important to Galesburg, for instance.
Well, Illinois has the second most miles of rail than any other place in the entire country. So rail is incredibly important. And what we're seeing a lot of now, there's this, out of North Dakota, is this crude oil that is traveling across the country now, which has just multiplied exponentially because of, that is a fairly new discovery there. So rail safety is also an important issue. As you said, Tim, you've got a rail track right close by where you live. I've got one right behind my house. I hear the train go by regularly. And so rail safety is a component of this as well.
And for the record, there's 9,982 miles of rail in Illinois.
Boy, I'm impressed with your knowledge of rail trivia.
That's what it is, trivia.
Impressive.
I should point out, just to clarify what Representative Butler was talking about, the freight lines own almost all of the rail track in the United States. The reason was they used to provide passenger service, but about 1971, I think the Rock Island was one of the last trains to stop passenger service. So Amtrak was formed to provide that passenger service. I want to turn back to the group president over at Caterpillar, Tom Paulette, for a final thought on where you think we are in terms of the progress that we're making, because the representative talked about you're seeing construction along I-55, you're seeing construction here and there. Is there hope in your estimation?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of progress that's being made, and I would go back to Secretary LaHood's comments. There are states out there that are taking it in their own hands, and another example I would use is Texas. So there is a lot of construction underway in Texas, even though oil prices are down, so the activity in the oil patch has slowed down. There's a tremendous amount of investment in the Houston to Dallas corridor and San Antonio to Dallas. So There is activity out there. We call it window market share. Whenever I drive along, what portion of that equipment is Caterpillar? So we pay a lot of attention, a lot more than I used to when I was in the gas turbine side. But there is pockets of activity which I hold out hope. This country is an amazing country, right? We're the innovation leader of the world, fantastic in manufacturing, still really the economic leader worldwide. And so I'm optimistic we will fix this. And we just rely on Washington to get it solved, the states also to do their part. But I guess my final comment is the comments about China. So China is a very important market for Caterpillar. We have 29 factories there as well.
Very briefly.
Okay, so my final comment, even in the economic slow times of China now, the one thing that they're still doing is investing in infrastructure. So residential construction's down, commercial construction's down, but they are investing heavily in infrastructure. It's important.
And with that, we thank you for joining us. We did invite Illinois Department of Transportation to participate in this program, and they found it not in their schedule. We want to say thank you to State Representative Tim Butler.
Thank you, Reed.
And to Tom Paulette, who is Group President at Caterpillar, and also to Congresswoman Sherry Bustos of the 17th Congressional District, and to former Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood. Thank you so much, and thank you. And we hope you find roads and bridges and rails in better shape in your future.